Every year, over 60,000 visitors tour the Ford Works at Dagenham, and some of them make a day of it by choosing to go on the river trip from Charing Cross in the heart of London. This method of travel makes a pleasant contrast to the crowded roads, and it also gives a passing view of London's busy and historical river. The launch skipper's commentary starts on the embankment with Captain Scott's ship, the Discovery, and the Wellington, headquarters ship of the Master Mariners. But we can take you behind the immediate riverside scenes to give you a closer look at London. Quiet backwater between the river and roaring Fleet Street is the Temple and its gardens. Inner and Middle Temple are two of the 4 Inns of Court that for centuries have been a centre of the legal profession. It takes its name from the order of the Knights of the Temple, who owned the land in the 12th century, and whose round church is now happily restored after the damage of the last war. Still in the same area and visible from the launch is the statue to the 19th century engineer Brunel, whose practical memorials include the great suspension bridge at Bristol, Paddington Station, and what was the Great Western Railway. The Fleet River once flowed into the Thames at this point by Blackfriars Bridge. Now there is just a sewer pipe. A new venture has sprung up hard by the bridge in the shell of an old warehouse, the Mermaid Theatre, brainchild and creation of Bernard Miles. He persuaded a number of businessmen and industries to support him in building this unique theatre with its open stage and riverside restaurant. He's already presented a number of plays in a new light and is always seeking fresh ideas. Only Bernard Miles could have found a place with the name Puddle Dock for the Mermaid, and the narrow lanes in this district abound with strange titles from an earlier age. One of the most famous of London's landmarks, St. Paul's Cathedral, is visible from a long stretch of the river and from many points in the city. Wren's great masterpiece survived the Holocaust of fire in the London Blitz when acres of surrounding offices and warehouses were destroyed. New buildings are springing up all round the cathedral, and it's to be hoped that the many lovely viewpoints will not be lost in the fever of reconstruction. Fish has been unloaded on the riverside wharves of Billingsgate for hundreds of years. The distinctive hard leather hats of the porters are not as common as they were before the war. The story is told of a cauldron of soup that was always kept going in a nearby eating house. On clearing out the soup boiler after a long spell of service, a fish porter's hat was discovered, and thereafter it was said the soup had lost its special flavour. Billingsgate lies between London Bridge and Tower Bridge in the Pool of London, the start of the Thames as a commercial river. Latest form of transport, and a frequent sight in summer months, are the helicopters flying from Battersea Heliport, who for safety reasons follow the line of the river. Famous Tower Bridge, opened in 1894, is a comparative newcomer to the scene compared with its much older neighbour, the Tower of London. This historic fortress was built by William the Conqueror and is one of London's most popular places for the visitor. You can rest tired feet from tramping round the buildings and galleries of the tower, or spend a few hours on the small sandy beach when the tide is out. Refreshment for the visitor, or routine lunch break on the lawns for the city typist, it all has a slightly continental look about it. Lying just north of the tower is Tower Hill itself, once the tragic site of the scaffold. It is now the rendezvous for visitors' cars and coaches, souvenir and postcard kiosks, and the daily scene of the public speakers who inform or entertain the lunchtime office crowds. The subjects are as endless as the style is varied, and the place abounds with characters. A white tower crowned with impressive figures marks the headquarters of the Port of London Authority, controlling body for the river, its commercial activities, and the 5 large groups of docks. St. Catherine's and the London docks are the first group to be met on the downriver run past the tower. Much of the country's wine imports come into these docks from the vineyards of Europe and the Commonwealth. Holidays abroad have given many people a taste for wine, and the country's drinking habits have changed to the extent that 2 bottles are now drunk for every 1 before the war. Tea and wool are among its other bulk imports, and some of the more exotic cargoes, such as ostrich feathers and ivory. The ivory warehouse has seen busier days, for the plastics industry has replaced the use of pure ivory for such things as hairbrush backs and billiard balls. Narrow streets and linking footbridges are the normal part of the dockland scene. A race of tough, individualistic dock workers, many of Irish descent, have grown up and lived within the sights and sounds of the river. There is still a tradition in this closely knit community of son following father in the dockland trades. The riverside cottages of the last century have housed generations of dockers, but again, the heavy destruction of the wartime raids was a blessing in disguise, for it forced the issue of replacing these old dwellings with modern labor-saving flats. Dockland has never been short of public houses, probably the most famous being the Prospect of Whitby. Seldom used by the local people, its curio-filled bars, restaurant and riverside garden are a favourite with visitors from every part of the world. Another glimpse from the past on the south bank of the river at Greenwich is the Cutty Sark. This was the last of the great sailing clippers, and today rests in a dry dock as a museum for tourists and an educational centre for the merchant service. One of the finest of the historic riverside buildings is the Royal Palace at Greenwich. Part built by Inigo Jones in the early half of the 17th century, it now houses the Royal Naval College and the Maritime Museum. The largest group of docks are the Royal Group, the Albert, Victoria and King George V. Here are the really big ships of the world, the multitude of bulk cargoes from everywhere to everywhere. Millions of tons of raw produce and finished goods are handled regularly, and these docks are an integral part of the country's economy. Reminiscent of Mississippi riverboats are the London County Council's 3 ferry steamers. This service takes passengers, cars and commercial vehicles across the river at Woolwich, and it's all free. Maids of all work on the Thames are the tugboats and lighters, most frequent of all passing craft to the riverborne visitor. 400 registered tugs and over 7,000 lighters are on the move day and night from wharf to ship, in and out of the docks, forming a major link in movement of cargoes. The tugs pick up lighters in 1s and 2s to form up convoys which may total a dozen or more. Many cars in crated form, engines and spare parts are moved in this way from the Dagenham wharf to the London docks. Tug and lighter crews, like the dock workers, are rugged outdoor men with an inherited skill in handling boats. It's not a bad job on a sunny summer's day. It's a different story at daybreak on a January morning. End of the river trip for the Dagenham visitors is the Ford Jetty, largest privately owned wharf on the Thames. Here the raw materials, coal, iron ore, etc., arrive and the finished cars, trucks and tractors leave. Ford have other production plants in various parts of England, but the main factory is at Dagenham, where the process starts with the melting of the iron ore and is carried right through to final assembly of vehicles. Visitors come ashore at the western end of the jetty. Owing to the enormous expansion of the factory in recent years, coaches are arranged to take the people to the main points of their tour. The Thames Foundry is the latest of the 3 Ford foundries and is the most up-to-date in Europe. Core making is a particular example of automation in modern foundry practice. Electric arc cupellers continuously discharge the molten steel for the castings. The pouring stage is in a clean, well-ventilated area, very different from the conventional idea of foundry work. The blast furnace and the coke ovens are all examples of the Ford policy of manufacturing as much as possible of the product. Surplus pig iron, coke, gas and byproducts are sold on the open market. "20 miles of internal railways link up the many loading bays, all helping to keep this huge organization on the move. In the new giant paint, trim and assembly building, the final stages of motorcar production are the sites the visitors associate most with a modern automobile factory. Ford looks out onto its river highway and is in turn on view to the passing ships. Cargo boats and luxury liners, small launches, and even at times the Royal Yacht. This is indeed an industrial giant on the banks of London's river.